right, so we're going to start out Unit 7 today, which hopefully will be some new concepts for all of you. And we're going to start our conversation with the game of Monopoly. If you haven't played Monopoly, maybe you should break that out and have a good time. The idea is you are able to purchase these different pieces of land known as properties, and they cost different amounts. If someone lands on it, they have to pay you. Something I had never noticed before is, in general, the further you go around the board, the more expensive these properties tend to be, ending with these most famous Boardwalk and Park Place. Very expensive to purchase, but also end up bringing in the most money. So big thanks to TI's website that provided this data set. What you'll notice is that each property, I've listed how many spaces it is from that starting position of go, and how much it costs to purchase that property. So as you kind of scan through this, maybe you'll notice that the further we go from the go space, kind of more money it's costing us to purchase those properties. So we're going to go ahead and use this data set and create a graph to help us see if that relationship that I'm suspecting is really there. Maybe help us see it a little bit better. So before we create a graph, let's talk about just two vocabulary words. We have two variables in this situation. What? Two? Yeah, that's what makes Unit 2 a little bit different from what we've done before. We have two variables. We have this variable, the number of spaces we've traveled from go, and another variable, how much the property costs. Two variables, we're going to look at them at the same time. So we need to decide which is going to be our x variable, which will be our y variable. In your mind, hopefully you're picturing, x, y, coordinate plane. It's the kind of graph we're going to be making. So the x variable is often called the explanatory variable. Get it? Explanatory? Yeah. All right, this is the variable we think will explain why the other variable is changing. So if I consider my two variables, I think that the number of spaces from go will explain the cost. So the number of spaces from go is going to be my x. It's going to explain the cost. So again, the number of spaces becomes my explanatory variable because it is explaining the cost. As usual, we're going to be creating a graph on our calculator. So in order to do that, you are going to need to include this data in two lists. Notice I said lists plural. We have two different sets of data, two variables, so you're going to need two lists. I'm going to go ahead and put my spaces from go in L5 and my costs in L6. So you'll notice that I already have those put into my calculator. I did that ahead of time. So this would be a good place for you to pause the video and go ahead and type those in. You'll notice my lists are much longer than they appear at first. Okay, it does go all the way down to that 39 and 400. Please also notice that I put the numbers in the same order. That's because this 9 has got to go with 120. I can't have 9 matching with 140. Those don't go together. 9 and 120 both belong to Connecticut Avenue. So make sure you put your numbers in order. All right, so once you have all your data in the calculator, we're going to go back to our familiar stat plot, which is how we created all our statistical graphs in Unit 1. So we're going to do that again. So of course, make sure it says on. And this time, instead of maybe a histogram or a box and whisker plot, we're going to select this first one, which we call a scatter plot. So in algebra class, it was like a coordinate plane graph, XY graph. In stats, we call it a scatter plot, but it's the same idea as what you did in algebra. And then we just need to identify where we put our x and y lists. Now, again, I said that I put mine in L5 and my y list in L6. Of course, if you use different lists, make sure you put in yours. And then the mark is just what symbol is going to show up. I personally am not a fan of the little tiny dot. I think it's hard to see. So I'd stick to either the plus mark or the box. And then as we did in Unit 1, we're going to do a zoom stat to have the calculator automatically adjust to a good window where we can see all of this graph. So I'm going to go ahead and go to zoom, and remember it's number 9, zoom stat. And there is my graph. There it is in all its beautifulness. So I actually included a little sketch of that here. So there's my graph, the same thing we just saw show up on the calculator. And hopefully you're noticing it does seem kind of like there's this almost pattern built into this. So again, this is called a scatter plot. And when we see scatter plots, we're going to be looking for a couple things to describe. We're going to be looking for a direction. Again, kind of big picture. If you were standing at the back of my classroom, squinting at this thing, do you see it taking a direction? Yeah, I see it kind of going this way, right? From left to right, it's going up. So we would call that a positive direction. And is it taking on some sort of shape or form? Okay, form, you're thinking like shape. Well, it does kind of have a shape. It has kind of this shape, like a line shape. We call that linear. By the way, in Unit 2, things that look linear are going to be really great for us. So I'm excited about that. We're also going to be looking for strength. If I had to judge how close all these little pluses are to forming a perfectly straight line, or how clustered they are together, I would describe that as the strength. Now, I don't know about you, but with the exception of just a few little marks, like this one, and this one, and this one, those little pluses are clustered really close together. So I would call this a strong relationship. They're really squishing together. And the last thing I'm looking for are any outliers, any weird points that just aren't doing the same thing as everybody else. And you'll notice I kind of circled. There are 3 that just seem like they're not really playing with the group. So I would just notice 3 that are not together. So when we make scatter plots, that's what we're looking for: direction, form, strength, and any unusual points. Let's go ahead and practice those couple of things with some other scatter plots. And then we'll get on a little later to what we actually do with the scatter plots. So this top one here, labeled C, let's go ahead and describe what we're seeing. If I had to pick a direction, generally the points seem like they are going up. Yeah, positive. Now, if I had to pick a shape, are they kind of making a shape? Now, some of you would say no, but I want you to maybe relax your definitions just a little bit. They may not be looking like a straight line, but again, if you're in the back of the room squinting, they're not a tight line, but they are in somewhat of a line. So I would actually call this linear. But are they all super close together like the Monopoly data? No way. I might call this maybe weak to moderate. Maybe weak in terms of the dots just are not really tightly pushed together. And then, again, because they're not tightly pushed together, I'm not sure that there's really any dots that don't fit the pattern. So I'm going to write down that I don't really see any outliers. All right, if we move on to graph F, again, I'm looking for those 4 things. A direction. Well, in general, these ones are going down, so that's negative. If I had to look for like some sort of shape or structure, it's not really a straight line, right? I mean, I see more of a curve here, so it's pretty curved. By the way, in Unit 2, we're not going to like curves. When I think about that curve, are my dots close together following that curve, or are they kind of spread apart? Well, wow, these, I mean, look how tightly clustered those are. So this is a strong relationship. It may not be a straight line, but this curve it's doing, it's curved pretty tightly. And then I do see a couple little dots that just aren't really following the pattern. So maybe 2 outliers, kind of identifying those. They're a little strange. And I'll go ahead and do one more here, part E. So again, if I was looking for a direction, it seems like they're going this way, so that's positive. Looking for some sort of shape, I would call this linear. I mean, overall it's following some sort of band to create a line, so I'd call this linear. It's not as mushy spread out as the top graph, but it's not nearly as closely clustered as this second graph. So I might call it this kind of middle word, moderate. And I do see that there's one dot. I mean, it's kind of following that line, but it's way far away. So one weird point, maybe. Again, I'm not entirely sure because it is following that line pattern, but it's way far away from the rest. So that's why I just put the question mark. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and finish up with B. Go ahead and describe those 4 things: the direction, the shape or structure, the strength that you see, and identify if there are any unusual points.